Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new J. Cole album For Your Eyez Only. North Carolina rapper, Dreamville figurehead, a lot of people see him as sort of a bit of a Jay-Z protege as well, but maybe not right now, at one point for sure, but not now. He is coming up to bat on this thing for his fourth full-length commercial album, following up 2014's 2014 Forest Hills Drive, which went double platinum with no features, as the meme goes. And with this new record over here, I feel like I'm getting a bit of deja vu with Cole's last record. Once again, he is dropping an album very late in the year. He also teased toward this album like he did his last one with a pretty aggressive cut where he goes at other rappers. I like the track a lot, but it's kind of disappointing that the song didn't make it onto this record though. But in retrospect, after listening to this thing, I get why that song wouldn't have really fit into the narrative of this album, I guess. Other parallels between this record and Cole's last album is that they are similarly low-key. Lots of very smooth, jazzy instrumentals on this thing, which are also paired with a handful of very nocturnal, very spacey trap bangers too. The beats are pleasant, but none of them really come off as all that urgent. And the same kind of goes for Cole's very laid-back rapping and moody singing, which occasionally is kind of off-key. Like, what is it on that song, Vile Mentality? The singing at the start of that track is terrible. Sonically, it's nothing groundbreaking for J. Cole or for hip-hop in general, but I do think some of the jazzy instrumentation and string sections that are paired with tracks like For Whom the Bell Tolls and She's Mine are actually pretty gorgeous. But the power of this album doesn't really lie in the instrumentals, but the story, the narrative of the album. Although I think the tale Cole spins on this record could have been told a little more cohesively. Basically, on this album, you have a young J. Cole, you have a friend of his from back in the day who died young dealing drugs. Which person Cole is rapping from the perspective of isn't always 100% clear, but the most obvious part of this story is Cole's friend's daughter, who is now fatherless. Cole is essentially trying to tell her father's story to her through this album. He says as much on the final track where he goes into an incredible amount of detail. The detail that, in my opinion, many of the previous tracks really lacked. A lot of the songs before the closer here read more like vignettes, and the title track is kind of like an epilogue that explains why all of these songs sort of make sense on the same album. But it's kind of strange that J. Cole would couch this whole album underneath the title track, this story about his friend that he's trying to tell to his friend's daughter, when a bulk of this album is just about J. Cole. As much as I like a song like Neighbors, that track doesn't really seem to fit into this conversation that he's trying to have with her. And there are other spots on this record where Cole goes into his own experiences with love and making bad decisions as a young man, and also fatherhood, specifically on the song She's Mine Part 2, which in my opinion is the most touching moment on the record. I appreciate the sentiment of this album as a whole and what it's trying to say, the point it's trying to make, but again, I think it could have been told in a more compelling, cohesive, and logically flowing fashion. And also with less filler lyrics, like the intro track, For Whom the Bell Tolls. We have refrains on here where Cole is rapping about whatever in his eyes, and it should come as no surprise. Such an obvious rhyme, such a filler lyric. Why should it come as no surprise? That makes no sense. It adds nothing to what you're saying. That's just a placeholder bar. Still though, the track does a decent job of setting the moody tone of the album and sort of the dark, tortured mentality of the fledgling drug dealer that Cole portrays on the next track, Immortal, which features these gritty lyrics and these simple, spacious trap rhythms and reversed melodies that are kind of hypnotic. But immediately after on this track, we have more filler lyrics kicking off the song Deja Vu. Put a finger in the sky if you want it, put two fingers in the sky if you want it, and so on and so forth. Does this mean anything? Probably not. And what this refrain has to do with the love song that transpires after it, I don't know. And of course, because it is a love song and it is Cole, there has to be a handful of like sort of cringy bars worked into the track. But at this point on the album, Cole starts developing a story. We have boy meets girl, then he starts sort of revealing himself on the song Vile Mentality and telling her about himself and sort of revealing his vulnerabilities. Then the deepening of their relationship on the song She's Mine Part 1, which of course, head game stronger than 2-Excedrin. I wanted to shut the album off. Still though, I think the way that Cole is bearing himself to his lover on these tracks is sort of admirable. And I like that we are getting some kind of story here that's building momentum, but then it all sort of changes pace on the song Change, which I do think is one of the better cuts on the record, but it doesn't really add anything to the story that's been building up for the past 3 tracks. Here again, we get kind of a bird's eye view of the drug game that Cole was rapping about on the song Immortal, and he sort of gives his thoughts on not only the vicious cycle that a lot of people might find themselves in if they enter into that world, but also the prison system, religion. He's speaking on all of these obstacles and injustices within the system, but he puts responsibility for change on the individual, talking about on the hook that you might expect change at the pen glide, meaning that you might expect some rapper or someone like me to just write or spit a lyric that all of a sudden will just change things, but that's not how it works. Real change comes on an individual level. It comes from within you. I like the track a lot. I think it's one of Cole's best tracks, and it's really insightful, smart, and tasteful piece of jazz rap. And again, I like the really dark and moody song Neighbors, which is essentially about racism and stereotypes, talking about Cole moving out of his old neighborhood into a predominantly, or I guess a presumably white upper class neighborhood where his neighbors think he's selling drugs, so they call the cops on him. Which brings us to the song Foldin' Clothes. Really the worst track on the record. Not just because of the obvious statements and filler lyrics where Cole is rapping about wanting to do the right thing, so much better than the wrong thing. We know that. We know that the right thing is better than the wrong thing. That's like saying the sky is blue. But really on this track, Cole is making a mountain out of a molehill. Nobody's gonna give you a medal for doing the laundry, dude. And also you're rapping about your girlfriend having a lot on her plate and having a lot to do, but she's just sleeping on the couch there. Not to say that she shouldn't be. Everybody deserves a nap. But, you know, it just seems like an obvious contradiction to the story that you're telling. And I do the laundry at my house. When I do, I don't gotta write a fucking song about it. It's just hilarious that Cole brings up doing the laundry after saying he feels like the best version of himself. Like, whoa, the greatest version of me folds clothes. Like, this is really you at your best, watching Netflix, hanging out on the couch, rhyming almond milk with almond milk. This is just regular life for millions of Americans in 2016. This is not an act of heroism. I get that the song is about the simple things in a way, sure, but Cole goes about portraying them in such a corny fashion that it's just such a skippable track. And that's pretty much the album. Even though it's over 40 minutes, it feels criminally short for the issues, for the pieces of story, the pieces of narrative that Cole is trying to develop here. The execution is just way off because I think for what Cole was trying to build and accomplish here, there are just too few moments directly and laser focused on the life of Cole's friend, on Cole's friend's daughter, on communicating these messages to her, on young Cole's life. The only reason this album makes a lick of sense is that the closing track sort of wraps it all up and explains, hey, here's what this album's actually about, guys. Despite all this, I do think this album is one of Cole's better projects. It's just kind of a mess, really. Cole has a lot of loose ends that really needed to be tied up, and they just aren't. I feel like he wanted to, or at least he was implying as if he was going to bring the listener on some kind of journey into his life or his friend's life or into his past, but instead we got like a few weird scrawled diary entries that are barely legible, and a weird track about folding clothes. I'm feeling a strong 6 to a light 7 on this one. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe. And please don't cry. Just leave an angry comment if you're angry. All sorts of links next to my head, other reviews you should check out. Subscribe to the channel, official website. Stay hydrated. J. Cole forever.